Hey everyone, and welcome back to Ideanthro. And welcome back to this mini-series where we are looking at how some local governments who have gone and got a budget for maintaining their water-sensitive urban design assets, how they've actually gone about doing that. And I've been fortunate to be able to observe quite a lot of local governments over the past few years, and I've seen some patterns in what they do. And I am describing to you a process that I've seen work before. It's not the only process, but one that I've seen work before, so that you can learn from it and maybe implement it yourself. Today, we are up to step 4, and that's building a business case. So what we've talked about in the previous episodes here were the fundamental steps of find the assets, so you know about, as many, you're never going to find 100% of them, but find all the assets you can so you've got a really good handle on what you've got and how much of it you've got. Number 2 is assess their condition, so you know what you've got, how much of it's good and bad. Then the next step was deciding what department should be responsible for seeing maintenance done, so which is the most logical department to do works, and then we're up to building a business case. Because at this point, we're really start to heading towards this briefing in a couple of steps' time, where we're going to brief up to management and to the political level and say, okay, you've heard about this problem before, well, we've got a solution to you. And here's why it makes sense. And building the business case is the why it makes sense. So the first thing I want to say here is often when we talk about business cases, there's this implicit assumption that it means money and that it means economics. The business case I'm going to describe today does in fact mean that, but that's not always the case. I'm going to talk about a business case about money and economics here because that is what I've seen work for local governments in this space. But it's not to say that it's the only way or that it's even the right way for you. So in a few episodes ago, before we started this series, in episode 121, we talked about Simon Sinek and his golden circle idea. And we talked about how you can use that when you have an idea that you're proposing in local government and proposing it to someone else, how you can use that to figure out how you sell it. And fundamentally, the take home from that was that, okay, you've got an idea that you want to propose and you know why you want to do it and you know what that idea is. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the person that you're trying to convince cares about the same things that you care about. So you need to sit down. The first step of this building a business case is actually to sit down and go, who do I need to convince? Now in local government, this is most likely going to be management, and it's going to be the political level. So you need to identify who you need to convince, and you need to ask yourself, what do they care about that my proposal about maintaining water-sensitive urban design assets can help them with? Now, as it turns out, I have seen it be quite successful when we talk about money and we talk about being financially prudent, because local governments are trying to balance the books. They're trying to do the most they can with the least amount of money for their community, and they're trying to keep their community happy. And as it turns out, that one of the things with these, particularly these vegetated water-sensitive urban design assets, is that on an asset-by-asset basis at least, when they are in good condition, they are relatively cost-effective to keep in good condition. But as soon as you let them go, as soon as you don't maintain them and let them decline, the cost to bring them back up to condition is heaps more. To give an example, there was some work that I did years ago at Logan City Council with assistance from other people there, including a student, Bryce Winiger, where we investigated the cost of maintaining a bioretention system and keeping it in good condition versus fixing up a bioretention system that we had let go for only 1 year. We'd let it go without any maintenance for only 1 year, and the cost to then fix up that system was 10 times greater than the cost that if we just maintained it. And the reason for that, not to digress too much here, the reason for that is that with a vegetated asset, if you don't maintain it regularly and the weeds get in and the weeds outcompete the desirable vegetation, that vegetation dies and suddenly you spend lots of money replacing that vegetation, and that's the costly bit. But anyway, the point here is that there's quite a potentially useful case for maintaining water-sensitive urban design assets purely on a dollar value. So think about it this way. If, as in this example, and these numbers vary for different types of water-sensitive urban design assets, but if, as in the case with this bioretention system, it's 10 times more expensive to fix it than it is to keep it good in the first place, what that really means for a politician is, hey, if we've got this asset over here that's in good condition and we don't do anything to it, how likely do you think it is that we will manage to go 10 years without someone complaining about that asset? A member of the public, because we know that as a politician, if there's a public complaint about it, something's going to have to be done about it. What's the bet? Like, how likely do you think it is that if we do nothing to that asset that's next to houses, right near to where someone lives, they can see it every morning when they drive out of their yard, how likely do you think it is that we're not going to get a complaint in the next 10 years? And it's 10 years because the asset's 10 times more expensive to fix than it is to maintain. So if you want to break even on that bet, right, you've got to go 10 years without any maintenance and not with any reactive money for it to be more cost effective to not do maintenance and just to respond to complaints, right? So suddenly we're starting to build a business case where you can go to the politicians and go, well, hey, how likely do you think it is? We've got this data on the cost of maintaining assets. I'll come back to where you get that data from in a second. We've got this data on the cost of maintaining assets. How likely do you think it is, if we continue to not maintain this stuff, that we're going to get through 10 years without this asset getting a complaint and that asset getting a complaint? Oh, not very likely, hey? Well, there we go. I know that it doesn't feel like we're spending anything at the moment on this stuff, but in fact, there's hidden costs. There are already complaints coming in, and this is being consumed or consuming money from other budgets. There's a complaint coming in, we're having to take some of the parks mowing budget over there and spend it on this, and that means our parks are degrading as well. Wouldn't it make more sense? And look, and while these water-sensitive urban design assets degrade, they're not doing their function that they should. Wouldn't it make more sense if we just started investing the money up front in keeping this stuff good, because it's almost certainly going to be cheaper and the assets are going to work better, and we're not going to be accidentally stealing money from other budgets as we go and letting other infrastructure degrade? Doesn't this holistically make a lot more sense to look after our stuff right now? That's starting to turn into a pretty compelling case, isn't it? So where do you get that data on maintenance costs? Well, look, there's some really quite good data out there at the moment. Healthy Waterways has a really good document specific to bioretention systems called the Guide to the Cost of Maintaining Bioretention Systems. I'm sure if you Google that, it'll come up. Melbourne Water also has a fact sheet that has maintenance costs for a variety of different water-sensitive urban design asset types. And there's also various presentations. I've got some out there about kind of the rehabilitation costs, or you could pretty easily, pick some example assets that were in bad condition and get some indicative costs to fix those up. You could pretty easily, through all of that, build the data that you need to start talking this business case. So the next thing that we want to talk about here is, I've talked initially pretty fundamentally about a basic level business case there, but we can start to make things a little bit more complex, but also more useful and more informative to target our maintenance. So the first bit of, well, shouldn't we be maintaining these assets for the reasons we talked about before? That gets you to going, yeah, that makes sense to maintain them. But it doesn't really get you towards, well, how much should our initial budget be? And that is dictated, or that can be guided. It's not dictated, but it can be guided by the foundational information that we picked up here. Because up here we found out how many assets we have, we found out the type of those assets, and we found out what condition they're in. Oh, we found out their size as well. So you can pretty quickly, for example, go, okay, the sum total of our assets, sum total of our bioretention systems is 10,000 square metres worth of filter media. Well, we know from that Healthy Waterways document what it should cost to look after that when it's in good condition per square metre, and what it's likely to cost to rehabilitate it per square metre. And we also know what percentage is in good condition, what percentage is in poor condition. And so you could start to play with some numbers and go, okay, what would happen if we got just enough money to keep all the good stuff good and just forget about the bad stuff for now? What would that cost as a starting point? Oh, okay, that was only $30,000. Well, a bit more. I said you got 10,000 square metres. That was only $50,000, which, yes, $50,000 is a lot of money, but on the other hand, compared to the size of some maintenance budgets in council, $50,000 is actually petty cash at this point. Okay, what would happen then if we went for, okay, keep all the good condition assets good and put in some money to fix up some of the poor condition assets. What would that mean? Oh, okay. Well, that would bump up the cost quite significantly, up to, you know, maybe $100,000, but that's still really quite affordable for maintenance. Okay, what about if we now tweaked the amount of money that we're spending on rehabilitating assets such that we could rehabilitate all the bad ones we currently have over a 10-year period? So our aim is at the end of 10 years, we're going to have everything in good condition. We're going to get there just little by little, by just gradually ticking it off. And so going in the first year, we look after all the good stuff, and we fix up some of the poor and bring it to good. And then in the second year, we now have a bigger pot of good stuff. We look after all of it, and we also fix up a few more of the poor ones. Well, you could look at those numbers and go, okay, what would it cost us to fix up 10% of the poor ones every year? Oh, guess what? That's $150,000 a year. You know what? That's not a crazy figure, but it's also a good figure to work with. It's achievable that could be administered probably without having to add a new staff member. Obviously, it's going to be extra responsibilities, but you might be able to administer that without an extra staff member. But you see what we're starting to do here. We're building off this foundational information and building it into this business case. And you can start to. I've done this previously. I initially started to do this at Logan City Council. I've done it more recently with Brisbane City Council. You can start to build up models that then go, okay, when we're keeping these assets good and fixing up this amount of the poor ones, it's going to cost us this much. We can also start to talk about the environmental benefit in terms of pollutants abated. And we can start to, if you want to, get into really some useful and informative tools. Now, you don't need to. At the beginning of this video, we talked about some really simple messaging about this stuff, but some sort of balance there where you're getting enough info to both convince the politicians and the upper management that they need to invest in this, because we've decided that they care about financial prudency and keeping these assets good, because that's something that they are interested in. That's why we're talking to them in this language and not a different language. If we were trying to convince someone who cared really passionately about waterways, we'd talk to them in a different language. But we are building up here enough info to speak coherently and compellingly to the people that we need to convince, and enough information to know just exactly how much money it is that we're asking for and what the implications are of asking for a bit less or a bit more. And that's how you start to build up a business case. It doesn't have to be super complex. It can be, and you can get more value from it. There's some cool stuff that, look, I like playing with spreadsheets, right? Which is why I've gone and in the past developed spreadsheet-based models for this stuff. But you can find the balance that works best for you and implement that. And that's it. That's building a business case. That doesn't talk about how we communicate that business case at this point. That's just getting the foundational numbers that's going to support. In the previous step, we decided which department should be doing the maintenance. Then in this step here, we're starting to collect the information, collect the knowledge that we are going to use when we brief up down here. And that's it. That is the end of this episode. Thank you for tuning in. Come back next time where we talk about who should actually do the works. It's one thing to decide which department should be responsible for the works getting done. It's another to decide who should actually do the works. So come back for that as we start to head towards this briefing where hopefully, if all goes well, a budget comes through. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next time.